Good morning, everyone. Very happy to have you all here on this last day of the Paris Peace Forum. And as a member of the steering committee, I have to say that I'm very happy to see this whole operation running smoothly, and we look forward to hear from all of you. My name is Rubam Haysen. I'm a Syrian Lebanese working on migration issues in the region, founder of an organization called Sawa for Development and Aid, working with migrants mainly from Syrian origins, and I'm very happy to be talking to you today about a very important issue. And as you know, every panel here is organized around one issue affecting local governance. And migration is one of the most pertinent ones of our year, I would say, and of the last couple of years. And as the title of the panel says it, we still have a long way towards a comprehensive approach to international migration. And I'm very happy to be joined by a very diverse range of speakers, both in terms of gender and racial diversity, but also in terms of work in specific sectors affecting migration in the world. So I'm joined today by Mr. Christopher Bayer, who's Vice Chair of the Management Board of the GIZ, Mr. Gilles Carbonnier, who is the VP of the International Committee of the Red Cross, Mrs. Aouna Eziakonwa, Assistant Administrator of UNDP, Mr. Enrico Letta, Dean of Sciences Po School of International Affairs, and Mrs. Maimouna Mohammed Sharif, Executive Director at UN Habitat Settlement Program. Maybe as a start for the panel, we will be featuring the project Kudra, run by a broad range of donors that Mr. Christopher, you have 2 minutes to brief us on before we kickstart the conversation further.
Yeah, first of all, thank you very much also for the invitation and for selecting Kudra as one example, one good example, I think, how to tackle the issue of migration and refugees. Kudra is a program which is financed by the European Commission. It's a huge program, about 80 million for 3 years is spent for this program. And it is implemented not only by the German Development Corporation, by GIZ, but by our French colleagues, by our Spanish colleagues, and by our Hungarian colleagues. And this is already something which is quite good, that we do something as Europeans together in addressing the challenges, especially for, it's directed toward the hosting communities, but also towards the IDPs, which have unfortunately been left out by the Global Compact. We will maybe talk about this one later on. And also the refugees. And what we are doing is really we try to support all these three groups in coping with the challenges they have, the huge challenges, which I don't have to describe, I think, at the moment, because we all know them. What we are doing there practically is a huge variety of things. We are working on different levels, so we are working with through our partners and with our partners and try to strengthen them in their capacity when we run our programs. We do multi-sectoral programs. We work on education, on vocational training, on health, on social support, and so on and so forth. And we try also to combine short-term and long-term impacts. So we have, for example, which is quite working quite well, we have a fund where we are supporting small and quick impact programs. This is mainly infrastructure, so we rehabilitated 50 schools, for example, and with labs and with other, let's say, more innovative formats, we also try really to be participatory as much as possible. So including not only the local host communities, but also the IDPs and the refugees in deciding what is most needed. And the nice thing in the program is that we are very flexible, so we can respond very flexible to all the needs, be it the local community or be it the refugees. I think I have to stop here.
Thank you. Mr. Gilles, I think I will start with you and ask you, if you close your eyes today and you want to imagine a really comprehensive picture of how we address one of the huge challenges, which is migration, how would that image look like? And what is the role of the Red Cross? What are you already doing, and what you would like to do more for this more comprehensive picture to come about?
This is a critical question, but good morning, Luba. Thank you very much. I'd like to just say that it's an honor for the International Committee of the Red Cross to be an institutional partner of the forum and also for me to participate in this conversation. I think my main message in response to your question would be that it is urgently needed that we have a more humane, comprehensive and consistent framework, but to start with, if existing rules and norms would simply be applied and respected by states, we would already avert a lot of immense human suffering. And let me just say that the International Committee of the Red Cross, together with our colleagues of the movement of the Red Cross and Red Crescent, including the French Red Cross, we are working all the way from countries of origin of migrants to countries of destination. And what we see is that there is a lot of instances where acute vulnerability hits migrants. To start with, let's take the example of the Sahel region or Syria, where we see that there are massive violations of international humanitarian law and human rights that actually oblige people to move. And we have today over 66 million forcibly displaced people, which is the highest number since World War II. And these people are seeking refuge elsewhere, but it's the same case that we witness in Central America because of the very high level of violence. And there what we try to do is to work with the military, security forces, non-state armed groups to reduce the level of violations and violence that is affected, especially the civilian population. And this is the first thing where I think we could do much better. And we cannot do it alone as a humanitarian organization. We need states and other non-state actors to join in. Then, just to say, along the migratory routes, for instance, in Libya, or in the Sinai, in transit places, what we see is that there is a lot of arbitrary detention where migrants are detained in sometimes horrendous conditions. Sometimes they are kidnapped for ransom and tortured. And there is an urgent need to try to work. What we do is that we try to have access to detention places. We try to change the situation in those detention places, to register anybody detained and to make sure that. But I think then along the route, you have the border with destination countries. And I must say that I discussed during this forum with the representative of the UNHCR, who just noted that even if the number of migrants crossing from Libya to Europe, to Italy, has reduced in total numbers, this year we have 8 out of 100 migrants who died being drowned in the Mediterranean Ocean. And this is a total failure of the search and rescue regime, and really urgent action is required also, because a search and rescue regime is at the origin of the law of the sea, which is, I would say, the bedrock upon which we have built the international law and international order. And finally, we are working with Red Cross and Red Crescent societies in destination countries, just to be sure that migrants have access to essential services, are protected, and that if then there is a decision with regard to return, that the principle of non-refoulement is upheld. So plenty of things to do, and we cannot do it alone.
Thank you. So you have briefly mentioned some of the challenges that migrants face in the short term, but as we can know, some people remain migrants for a very, very long time. So this is why I would like to turn to Mrs. Ahuna and ask you more about UNDP's approach to migration. How do you make it more comprehensive? And what are you trying to achieve throughout your work that is more on the developmental or the more sustainable and long-term basis?
Thank you. There are 4 things that I'd like to say about what a comprehensive approach would look like. The first is evidence-based approach. I think that there's an assumption that we understand migration and who is moving and where. But I think in the noise and the debate, we may have forgotten the human face of migration, the fact that migrants are people like you and I, and that they are, first and foremost, human beings with needs, and that the reason they're moving is to improve their conditions. So I think that we need to be guided by evidence of who is moving, Why are they moving? Where are they moving to? What are they doing when they get to destination? And so on, and how are they moving? I think that evidence has to be generated for us to be comprehensive enough. And it has to be on one page for everyone globally. People need to operate out of the same data. Because right now, I think the approach is driven by politics, misperceptions, myths, and a whole host of other things than the real reasons behind the issue. The second is policy coherence, which is really missing in the debate. Right now, both in the global north and the global south, we have a fragmented approach to this, also between government entities. So you need a whole of government approach where we have the same strategies towards the goal that we want to achieve. And I would also venture here to say that the absence of coherence in the policy, it's what actually breeds irregular migration. And so that needs to be fixed, and that's a huge component of a comprehensive approach. The third one is that the need to acknowledge and recognize the need for migrant labor. And, you know, once this is acknowledged, it is the unacknowledged need that puts this issue, that put smugglers and traffickers at the center of bridging that gap between labor supply and labor demand instead of governments. So another element of that approach has to be that we acknowledge that there is a need for migrant work, and that also migration is not the problem. It actually has proven to be the solution for the development needs that we see around the world. And if we acknowledge this, we would... And finally, I think from the perspective of the UN, the idea that we can lead the world towards a more equal arrangement globally and in countries, that inequality is at the heart of the deficiencies that my colleague from ICRC mentioned, where people are not created, there's no hope being created for people in their areas, in their home areas. I'll give you an example. I read somewhere actually that what you earn in a day in a country like Norway or Sweden is what people in Burundi or Sierra Leone would earn in a year. So globally we have, you know, incredible inequality that only development can solve. And from the UN perspective, the Sustainable Development Goals, the 2030 agenda that member states have signed up to, give us a huge opportunity to begin to right these wrongs on inequality. And then we can start talking about dealing with these issues.
Thank you. And actually, you've raised very nice segues that I can address to other speakers. And I would like to turn to Mr. Enrico and ask you first, before getting into Sciences Po and the space that academia can provide for such conversations, I'd like to ask you more on the international relation side of things. Mrs. Ahuna mentioned the need for a whole of government approach, but also for kind of more consistent approaches in governments in same regions, for example. Let's take the EU as an example. How do you think the Global Compact for Migration was received in governments, and has it been really, have there been a real effort to start seeing it roll out?
Thank you, Ruba. It's terrific for me to be here. Sciences Po is partner of this event. Our students are here. They are working for the organization of this event. I thank them very much. What you asked me brings me to think what I experienced before being a professor at Sciences Po. In the night between October the 2nd and October the 3rd, 2013, there was the first big dramatic collapse of a boat close to Lampedusa in the Italian coast, and the first 360 people dying in the Mediterranean. I was at that time Prime Minister of my country, and I was confronted to something that was for me completely unexpected, and we were without any toolbox. So I asked to our European colleagues, to our European friends, first of all, solidarity. We have to try to find a solution all together, and first of all, we have to honor these dead. And for me, it was the most important problem at the very beginning. We were without any possibility to give an immediate answer. Frankly speaking, no solidarity at all. And so we were obliged, as Italian Navy, to build up Mare Nostrum. Mare Nostrum was the safe and rescue operation. For 1 year, Mare Nostrum with the Italian Navy rescued around 100,000 people. Then it was stopped. I never understood why. But this operation continued in the old sovereignist, anti-immigrants movement parties considered as the guilty, the way to ask them to come. It was at the opposite, the only way to give an humanitarian response. You know, Ruba, you mentioned, I think, the first point, human being, death, the Mediterranean. If a biologist next century starts studying what happened in the bottom of the sea in the Mediterranean, the first point he will find a lot of skeleton. And he will ask to himself, trying to see some books of history. I hope books of history will be there in the next century. He will try to find which kind of war happened in the Mediterranean. Why 20,000 skeletons are there? And at the end of the day, no wars, but a lack of governance, a lack of solidarity, a lack of political response. This is why what you ask me is the main problem. If we don't have a good governance on migrations, if we still try to have a national response on this topic, any national response will be unable to find concrete and effective solutions. Only a collective response can, first of all, save and rescue in the Mediterranean and stop this disaster, this humanitarian disaster. We are here for the celebrations of the end of World War I, millions of deaths and so on. But we are again there. It's not a war, but I think it's worse than a war. And what is really a shame is the lack of political response. So I took my experience with me in the work today with the students, so we try to discuss, to find solutions, and I think this is a great opportunity, this forum, not only for very good projects and solutions, but to give a message to the world. And I'm European, I was there, so to give a message to the European leaders: stop, please stop this disaster, take your own responsibilities.
And it seems to me that the collective government response has actually been quite the opposite. It's been like governments inviting one another to more right-wing policies on migration. What does this tell us about failures of states to deal with their own problems internally?
Because there's the idea that you can have national response, and having a national response, you can leave the virus in the countries touched by the virus. And in Europe today, you have two countries of first arrival, so Italy and Greece, and one main country of final destination, that is Germany. These are the three countries more touched politically by the topic. But the short-sighting of the rest of the European anti-immigrant leaders is not to understanding that it's not enough to try to leave the contagion in the country where migrants arrive or where migrants want to get, because the European space is a large space, and the true strength of the European Union is a lack of borders. If you stop this strength, if you stop this opportunity, all the European Union collapsed. The idea of the European Union being a great space. So this is the key point, and this nationalistic solution is just to get votes, is just to talk to the people saying that we are defending you. But my experience is that the more vocal anti-immigrant people are the people, they want not to have solutions. They want to get open the problem, because having the problem open, they can get fears, they can exploit fears from the people, and they can get votes. And this is why I think my experience is that you can't have an intergovernmental solution. You need at European level to have a communitarian, supranational solution. The only way is to have someone delegated by the others taking responsibilities and solution. If you imagine 28 people around the table, all the prime ministers of the European Union, and you have an emergency, and they are discussing how many migrants can you take in your country. And you have, for instance, one country, Hungary, saying that for me is zero option. I don't take any migrant. For all the others, it will be very complicated to say, okay, we can welcome 1,000, 5,000, because you will have your public opinion saying that you have to behave as the Hungarians. So the intergovernmental method is an totally ineffective method at the European level on this subject. We need to have a supranational responsibility able to take immediate responses and to redistribute the solutions.
Thank you. We will come back to that and to the responsive governments, but I would like to give the space also to Mrs. Maimouna and Mr. Christopher to answer the first question. What does a comprehensive approach to migration look like for UN Habitat working on settlement within cities and communities?
Thank you very much, Ruba, for having UN Habitat here. I think that we heard the four speakers, and today we know that it's more than 1 billion migrants in the world, and representing 1/7 of the world population. And by 2050, 2/3 of the world population will be in urban areas. So that is, and migrants are very diverse. The reason why they migrate from one country or one city to another is more on the looking for a better quality of life. And as you know, that UN Habitats also works in cities and in human settlement. And we know that cities is the engine of growth. And there's also challenges and opportunities. So what I would like to impress upon here is that our work is how can we have the integrated and holistic sustainable development plan in the cities, which include, if you talk about Sustainable Development Goal 11, is to be inclusive, to be safe, to be resilient, and cities is for all, and all is for cities. So this, I think, is very important for us to look into all the three levels, the national level, the regional level, and also at the local level. Because at the local levels, migrant is in the DNA of the cities. And urbanization is also an opportunities, unless it's plan-led development. So to a certain extent, migrants play a role in the urbanization. And I think we looking into the comprehensive approach. I go back to having the integrated and holistic development plan.
But how?
Other at is the national level, at the regional level, at the local level. And how we need, as my colleagues mentioned just now, that we need the data, methodologies, and the political will. This is very, very important to absorb and understanding why the migrant coming. Sometimes the migrant move due to natural disaster, and also looking for a new green pastures. So I think all these issues and data need to be collected I think most of the sometimes the policies at the country level or at the local level been done with not enough analysis and data. Then that is one of the role of the UN Habitat. We are our normative part of the roles is to collect data, to come up with the guidelines, and also come up with the policies which can work together with our other UN agencies, with the countries, and also with the stakeholders. As our friends said, we cannot do it alone. We have to get partners. So I think this is the comprehensive approach that I would like to propose when dealing with migrants. Thank you.
So, Mrs. Ahuna also mentioned in her points the creation of hope, and I think what GIZ has been trying to do through the Qudra project is to really be able to create hope for the communities. How would you say projects like Qudra are hard to manage and achieve because there's so many stakeholders involved, and how much hope are you actually creating, and how is that linked to the national, regional, international levels that Mrs. Maimouna just mentioned?
You. First of all, let me make some preliminary remarks regarding migration, because I heard the interesting voices of our panelists here and the previous speakers. First of all, I'm not so sure if I would really agree with you saying migration is just the potential to solve problems, and it's an option, or it's an opportunity, or it's really a problem. I think it's both. I think it's really both, because it is a problem for a lot of communities. It's a problem for refugees. It's a problem for internally displaced persons. So we have to help a lot of groups and stakeholders to turn the problem which we have into an opportunity. I think this is what we have to do. And second is, if we talk about migration, I mean, the smallest part of migration which is happening is the one coming to Europe. Much bigger part is happening in the south, is south-south migration. And we tend to forget what does it mean, the south-south migration, where's the potential for south-south migration. There's a huge potential also for economic development for the countries if we foster south-south migration, because we are convinced that migration inside of Europe is a big chance for Europe. So we are convinced that inside of south-south regions is also a big chance. And I think we have really to take migration as a reality which has to be managed quite well and better than before, which is mostly our mixed flows, which we see, and mostly a huge variety of reasons why people are moving. So it's complex to address. And as I said before, when you ask me what is a comprehensive approach, we have heard already some issues, which I totally agree. We have to have this multi-level approach. We need definitely on the global level an agreement and compact which is strong, which we can follow because they are the norms decided upon. It's a human rights approach which is important, which has to be in the center of all our approaches, but also at the other levels. And I just want, because the local level was mentioned, I wanted to mention also the national level is important. So we also try to support national governments in their migration governance. So they have also to be supported in how to handle their cross-border relationships, how to identify properly the migrants, how to deal with the migrants, etc. How to do better in border management. So we have another huge program beside of Qudra, the Better Migration Management, where we try really also to deal with border management, not to prevent people from moving, but to regulate it properly and to really protect the migrants, as you said, much better than they are protected at the moment.
How do you hold governments accountable in this program? Because as we know, this is not what has been happening on borders. People have been kept out, of borders quite violently. So, is your program only about implementation, or do you also kind of document these human rights violations?
No. What we try is really to work on the issues of where human violations are happening. So we try to sensitize, we try to strengthen the capacity of the institutions responsible, for example, for border management, to make them more responsible, to make them understand how to deal with different mixed flows, how to deal with the migrants in a much more in a much better way without human violations. And of course, it's a tough dialogue, and it's difficult, and you have to deal with governments and states which in the past have not been followed this road. But there's, according to us, no alternative to cooperating, to trying to really to sensitize and to strengthen the capacity that people are really able to manage this in a different way. And what has been said before also, I totally agree with the issue, but it is so easily said that we have to look for a whole of government approach. I mean, we learned it quite stressfully, I would say, in Germany, for example. It's not only that we have to cooperate better between humanitarian aid and development aid, for example, and this is difficult enough already. But there we have a joint, let's say, a common vision of what has to be done and so on. What was, according to my observation, much more difficult at the European level, but also in Germany, is to bring together the ministries of interior and the security people with the development world, and then to jointly learn how to address the issues up front. And I was very happy that we had really a very intensive discussion, and you know it quite well, that we had in the beginning from the ministries of interior, not only in Germany, in whole Europe. There was the idea of this less for less, you know. If the countries of origin do not accept a certain number of people brought back to those countries, we would reduce development cooperation. And this idea is gone, because I think there was a strong learning process between the ministers of interior and the ministries of development in understanding better that this can't be the way forward. So I see that there is an improvement in this whole of government approach, but it is a long and difficult way. It's not easy to be done, you know. It's really that you have to link totally different logics of political goals and systems to bring them together in a more holistic and comprehensive way. And I feel this is a very, very important thing to do.
So let me go back to Mr. Gilles and go back to the question of one of your points you raised is that not only do we need new regimes, but we need to make sure that the old regimes and the old laws are being applied. As an organization like the Red Cross that has a huge presence in all of the countries where trafficking is happening also, you have been, do you have any role in that? And if not, why? And my second question is, in contexts like Syria and others, where you really had to make ethical considerations like access versus neutrality, access versus seeing human rights violation happen or seeing war crimes happen and not take any stance or even cooperate with other people who are trying to advocate for rights. How do you make these difficult calls within your vision of the Red Cross to stay neutral and deliver your work?
Yeah, Ruben, if I may, I will start by just addressing some of the points made by Christophe and Enrico. Christophe mentioned the question of engaging critical ministries. And actually, it's true for the International Committee of the Red Cross. Before, we never or hardly ever addressed ministries of interior in Europe or the Homeland Security in the US. Today, we are deeply engaged with these ministries. First, to make sure that families of migrants are not separated at the border. Second, to make sure that they don't go missing. And third, if we have missing people, to make sure that everything is done in order to be able to, know about the whereabouts of the missing people and inform the families, support the families of the missing. And what you mentioned about this ship which was sunk close to Lampedusa with 360 or more migrants on board, it has been also a wake-up call for us to say we have to be much better first at trying to identify and restitute in a dignified manner dead bodies to the families so that they can know about that, but also assist and protect the families of the missing through a whole range of issues, which goes not only in psychosocial support, which is essential, but also legal counseling, microeconomic support and livelihood support, and a lot of other measures. And what we have found out is we just to give you a number, at present we have over 100,000 cases which has been brought to us by families searching for missing people. And this is just a fraction of the overall number of people missing. So we really have to do much better. And we are presenting here, we have a booth with a new project called the Missing Person Project, where we really invite states, non-state actors, private firms, tech firms that can also help, and a lot of also universities and researchers, forensic and others, to really build a coalition where we can provide a much quicker response, because being without any news of missing migrants is really very deleterious to family life. It prevents people from moving ahead. So I just wanted to highlight this as a very important issue. And then to your question, Ruba, which is your question related not only to Syria, but to many other armed conflicts where we are active. We have international humanitarian law and the Geneva Conventions providing clear rules and guidance with regards to how an impartial, neutral humanitarian organization should be able to try to protect and assist the population affected by armed conflicts. In the case of Syria, like in the majority of conflict today, we have a non-international armed conflicts where we have actually to negotiate with the powers who are in charge a space where we can do our work. And what we have found out is that it is never a given. We have security constraints with some of our staff and the staff of also UN and other humanitarian organizations being killed or kidnapped. So we have to negotiate for security guarantees in order to access those places. And then we'll still live in a world of which is based on an order that rests on sovereign states. And in this world, well, there is a need to engage states ceaselessly to try to first have them respecting and abiding by international rules and regulation, even in the midst of war. And second, to try to have also this space for humanitarian organization to provide meaningful response. So it's not a given. It's a constant negotiation, and we need more support. And I just like to conclude by saying that what we see in armed conflicts today is more and more conflicts where you have foreign states providing some sort of support to different militaries or armed groups. And these foreign states who provide support to parties to armed conflict, they also have a responsibility under the first article of the Geneva Conventions, not only to respect, but to ensure respect for international humanitarian law. And we are working to try to bring those states to really support those efforts as well.
So we don't want to make the state an untouchable kind of entity. And I remember at the time of my father, he always tells us that when he was a young man, universities were a very vibrant spaces where protests would start, where political and social activism would ignite. Do we see that in universities today in Europe? I mean, or do we see young men and women maybe taking for granted democracy, where in some other contexts people are paying blood and lives to have these rights, to question states, to push forward the debates on migration and others? Do we see that today in universities, Enrico? And how are you as a dean of the international relations faculty trying to really ignite this passion again with students and universities? And what academia is playing as a role, not only as an ivory tower institution, but to have really these open conversations that push people towards action?
I think that for universities, for academia, for what we are doing, what we did during the worst period of the crisis 2 or 3 years ago, even today, university was a very open space and very free space in which values, humanitarian values, were, I think, at the top in comparison with the rest of the system. We had in many universities very important initiatives, concrete initiatives. I think our students, and those students usually are the most open to try to immediately find some concrete solutions or to be involved in solutions. So I see there very important signs of hope. I see there some signs of hope also in terms of how to find, how to discuss, how to make research activities, new ideas, how to have cooperation with NGOs or with international supranational organizations. We had, for instance, in Sciences Po with UNHCR a very good cooperation on some of these topics. The key problem I see is the big cleavage between the university world and the rest of in Europe, I'm talking Europe, of course, and the rest of the environment, fears, reactions that you feel in the rest of our cities. So the big risk is to have a great cleavage between a university world open, really open, working on solutions, and the rest of our social urban environment in which fears are at the top and in which there's a redistribution and there's not a correct balance. Because when I think the most crucial problem is when you feel the problem is completely out of order and the situation is out of control. That was exactly what happened in Europe in these very years. The feeling was everywhere the situation is out of control. Even where the situation was not so complicated, but the message brought was we are in an out of control situation. So the feeling among our people was the feeling to be afraid and to say, so we need tough reactions. We need tough solutions. We need a strong man giving us security, defense to this unknown, to this terra incognita. We don't know what will happen. So what I see as big challenge for our world, for the university world, is exactly to avoid this cleavage and to be able to spread this open mind approach, solutions, welcome, and the way to separate problems, for instance. I think it's impossible to work on this issue without having a separation between the refugee rights and the general migration problem, because that was one of the problems of the last 5 years. We put everything in a box, and it was a disaster in terms of solutions, lack of solutions, and in terms also of message. So my point is that at the university level, I see very important positive approaches. The big problem is that we have exactly to avoid to be separated from the rest of the fears of our people. So I see there a big challenge for all of us.
Talking of separations and of divides, we see today in cities, even for migrants who have been living in the cities for a very long time, that they are still not part and parcel of the social fabric of the city. Oftentimes, because of gentrification and because of new city designs, they are even more and more pushed to the outskirts, which is replicating cycles of inequality. How can we address this big challenge in cities?
As I mentioned earlier, that is the migration had to be, first thing had to be prioritized if you want to solve it, either at the global level, national, local, state level, regional or local. I have the experience when UN Habitat working together with UNHCR in Kenya. in a camp called Kakuma, Turkana, where when we look at the refugees or the migrant, they are not staying for 1 day or 2 days. Even in this case in Turkana, they were there already 10 to 15 years. And what we did was that we're trying to include the in terms of the inclusivity, and to get the local, the host country or the local, and the migrant or the refugee, that to take them as one community. And it is very fortunate that in these studies, or in this case, that the land is given by the governors to that particular refugees. And what we did was that we had the planning for this area, inclusive, meaning that we were giving them the house, also, planning for the house, for the sanitation, for the works in terms of commercial, and trying to include the people on the ground or the community, existing community, together with the refugee. And that is not easy, because sometimes they felt that we are putting more benefit, giving more benefit to the incoming migrant and refugee compared to the local. Because there are a camp, there are proper houses and proper sanitation. But I think this need to be complete, integrated with the local leaders and with the local community, and also the political will, as I mentioned earlier. And this is to me, it is not easy. And for example, like our work in Iraq, we have work in Iraq. We come up with the tools for the local leaders, for the national leaders, to tackle the issues of migrant. And also, for example, that our work is, I think I can share with you our three works that we are doing now. In Iraq, we are support the national institutional to implement long-term shelter. Because either you like it or not, they will be there. And the second is in Tunisia. We have a program in Tunisia. We also, the purpose is to strengthen the municipal capacities in coping with the creation of toolkits in coping with the migrations. And UN Habitat's not there to build the house or to build the roads, but we are giving experts in terms of the integration and the planning for that particular area. That's where the migrants and the refugees are. Thank you.
Unfortunately, I didn't design the setting of this panel, and I think like this is a very exclusive conversation, excluding any migrant voices or people from the community. But speaking of the work of the UNDP in the communities, how can you ensure that you're not doing any work without the presence of the communities in times where some of the community members are forcibly displaced outside the communities? And I can give Syria as an example just because of my knowledge, where a lot of cities that today don't have their original inhabitants. There are some programs that are starting to be implemented there without the inhabitants of origin being even present in these cities.
Thank you. I mean, just before I address that, let me repeat what I say, that migrants are not the problem. And I think we need to separate issues. Yeah, I totally agree with what Enrico was saying, that I think there's a global unwillingness to really unpack the issues. So everything is lumped together into one big giant problem. And that as long as we continue to project the migrant as the problem, we will not be able to get to solutions because it is our reaction to the phenomenon of mobility, of movement, that is the problem. It is how the world is reacting to it that's precisely the problem. And by the way, mobility didn't start today. It's a historical part of humanity, and we need to go back to that reflection and talk about who has been moving throughout history and what contributions have those movements made to development. So what I'm trying to say is that the narrative right now is that the migrant is the problem, and yet we know that the solution lies somewhere in between. I think that in terms of how you ensure the communities are part of the development programming, I'm not familiar with the specific community that you refer to, but in terms of UN development programs business model, we cannot do development on behalf of people. Development programs have to be built on that foundation of communities themselves participating. That's a general principle that we have. In a case where you have everybody gone, I'm not sure what then the formula could be, but I don't imagine that there are places where you have absolutely no one, and then you have to work with what you've got in that community at that time. You know, I was in Sierra Leone when the war was there in the late 90s, and yes, a lot of people left the country, fled the country, but there were still people in communities that we could build on and work with. But the principle is that you have to work with the communities, I think.
I mean, we keep on hearing that we have to work with the communities, and localization has become a very sexy kind of word on the agenda of development, whether in the past World Humanitarian Summits or others. But how much are we really localizing development and aid, and how are we measuring this localization? Is it enough to open a bid for $20 million and then an INGO gets 18, and then by the time it trickles down to the community, it's almost no money? How do you in Qudra are ensuring that this localization happens? And I want to push you a little bit here, because we've seen that on the Qudra project, it's been a little bit challenging to work directly with the local organizations, and there's been layers and layers of bureaucracy and too many countries perhaps involved in this program. So how can we counter these challenges and ensure it's a really grassroots work?
No, I think you're right. I mean, one has to see how far are we successful in localizing. There, I found it extremely important to have the local level on the screen, in the focus. I still believe that we do not do enough for strengthening local communities, and also for the SDGs, not only for the migration issue. If we do not have really strong, well-financed local communities who are able to tackling the problem, then we will fail. So the first level is, of course, to focus on these local communities, and there I think we are quite well in approaching them and trying to find partners, good partners, and to find out, okay, what is their problem? What is their problem in handling the case? And then in a very
Are they at the table at the decision making?
Yes, of course they
or
are
are
on
they
the table.
only implementing?
Yeah, of course they are at the table in the decision making, and not only the local communities. As I said in Qudra, for example, with these quick impact projects, there we have a variety of stakeholders on the table, not only representatives of the bureaucracy, but also of the communities and of the NGOs and of the representatives of the group. But it is a challenge. I mean, I agree with you. It's not easy to do so. It is a challenge. It's also a challenge if you address directly groups of the population. Then you have to find out what does it mean for the properly elected representatives of a community. If you bypass them, you would also have a problem. So what I said before, in a comprehensive approach has always also to combine long-term perspective with short-term perspective, which is extremely difficult, especially in fragile context, as we all know. But it is possible. You have to think about, and what has been said, to bring together also. We try this in the Qudra project. We try this with these labs where we bring together IDPs, refugees, and local communities in working together in identifying what is exactly what they need and what is exactly what they want. But it is not an easy approach. It is a difficult approach, and you have to bear this always in mind. this is a principle of do no harm, that you can't avoid to address the whole society, which is in some of our projects even more difficult. If you think on the projects where we support people who are returning in their countries, it's much more difficult because they will be distributed over the country, maybe in different communities. So how do you help those people returning and at the same time hosting communities? You never know where they are going. So which community is the hosting community of those people? So there's a lot of practical problems involved, but we are trying quite hard in piloting and inventing new formats in order to include everybody in the game.
So just for the sake of making this a little bit more fun before we open to the Q&A, if you had one wish that will be 100% granted of something you can change in the way the system is dealing with migration today, if you can change one law, if you can do one thing that will make things different, and you are granted this wish, what would it be for each one of you in 1 minute?
Can I?
Yes.
My wish comes from my experience. We had, and I don't want to be misunderstood.
And you have 1 minute, so.
Yeah, I don't want to be misunderstood. Migration crisis, the euro financial crisis, two completely different problems, but the same problem at the European level, the lack of good governance to solve it. At the euro financial crisis, we had a solution. The solution was superpowers in the hands of one person, the chief of the European Central Bank. He had superpowers, and he used...
So dictatorship.
Superpowers delegated, so democracy. So he had these superpowers, and he won. The euro was rescued and was saved. So the situation is completely different. But what I want with my magic wand is to have one super Mario Draghi for migrations at European level. So one big boss delegated by all the member states and European institutions.
A government or?
No, one European institution, vice president of the Commission with all the superpowers to intervene, bridging together the home problems, the welcoming problems, the foreign affairs problems, and the different humanitarian problems that the topic has. If you have it for one period, I think you can have at European level solutions for the first time in Europe.
Thank you. Who wants to go next? Christopher?
Yeah, because I know that the moderators like those questions, but I have to disappoint you. I think there is no one thing we can do and then we solve all the problems.
One dearest to your heart,
yeah,
maybe.
But what I see, what I would wish for the next stage of dealing with the issue is to concentrate more on legal migration issues. So to open up more legal opportunities for migrants to come and to work and on other places. There's a lack of focusing on those issues. This is very limited, and this would be my wish for the next period of dealing with those issues.
Yeah, I think mine is similar. I think the legal migration, circular migration, recognizing that migration has a major contribution to make to development, and that we need to tap into that. So opening up legal channels to regularize migration and give people opportunities to make their contributions. And I think all of this is contained in the global compact for migration. And so my wish would be that nations would sign and implement it.
Roba, can I have two wishes?
We'll see, but
yes, yeah. I was a mayor before for 7 years in Penang, Malaysia. So from my experience, from the local level, I think that is my wish is that to increase the capacity of knowledge and also finance and infrastructure at the local level, at the mayor's level, to tackle this either is illegal or legal migrants in terms of giving them inclusivity and right to the cities. That is from my experience as a mayor. From my 9 months experience as a ED of UN Habitat, I would like to see that we can work together UN Habitat, with other UN agencies, with other stakeholders, and with other organization handling this, to come up with a really what you asked just now about the comprehensive, integrated, sustainable development policies, which include the aspect of migration. That is two wishes that I would like to. Thank you.
You have 1 minute, Gilles.
Yes, I will try to tell you about my dream in less than 1 minute. I think that even if we all recognize that states, governments, they have a sovereign right to regulate migratory flows on their territory, it is not a blank check. It is not a blank check to do whatever. And I think that the Global Compact on Migration that I hope all countries will endorse next month reasserts existing rules and regulations that do apply. And my dream is that this will be then implemented by all states, and you can count on the International Committee of the Red Cross and the International Red Cross and Red Crescent movement to help in doing this and in implementing or making this dream a reality.
That's a great pitch, and we're 15 seconds early for the Q&A, which is great. So we have 30 minutes and 15 seconds for all your questions. Please raise your hand, and the microphone will be will come to you. I will start with number 8.
Hello. My name is.
Sorry, I will take 3 questions, maybe. So number 8, 2, and 6. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Samuel Getachew. I'm from Ethiopia. I work for a newspaper called The Reporter. My question is for Gilles. First of all, I'm sorry what happened to your employees in Nigeria. And what has been the reaction so far to make sure that young people who do work for your organization, which is one of the most respected organizations, will feel safe to work for your organization? And my other question for anyone who wants to answer is, we hear of sexual exploitation that's been happening within NGOs. I mean, Congo being an example. And the idea of protecting anyone from sexual exploitation is something that needs to be updated, tweaked once in a while. And what has been the latest update to make sure that no women or children will be exploited looking for safety within the space of the UN or NGO organizations? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Number 2.
Assalamu alaikum. Tislami Yaruba for this wonderful panel and the brilliant experts we have this morning. I have a question for all of you. Complex and multi-layered crises bolster the necessity for very intelligent problem solving. With the global migration and displacement crisis, we are seeing a dangerous blurring of the lines between migration, displacement, smuggling, and trafficking. What needs to be done at the level of international public policy, as well as ground-up capacity, to ensure that this universal crisis does not accidentally mask these undercurrents that might eventually become crises of their own out of negligence and misunderstanding? Thank you.
Thank you, Lynn. Thank you very much for the question.
Hello? Hello, everyone.
Oh, we can't hear you. I'm sorry. There's a problem maybe with that.
Hello? Yes. Okay, cool. Hello, my name is Shogi Ahmad and I'm from Sudan. So I have 2 questions. First of all, basically speaking about migration and the challenges that we're facing in the 21st century, what is within your respective institutions, how do you tackle, how you manage to include the migrants themselves in creating the projects themselves and activities? And the second question is the role of youth within the institutions. How do you manage to put their youth in the table of speech?
So maybe we will answer this first round and then open up for more questions. Who wants to start?
Well, I can start by addressing the question of Getachew with regards to, indeed, we have we had two midwives in northern Nigeria who had been kidnapped on the 1st of March. And the two of them have been eventually executed in this month, in October, November. And this is quite dramatic in a sense because it is a bit related to what I told you, Ruba, before with regard to security guarantees that we are trying to ensure. And it has become ever more complex because we see a fragmentation of armed groups and allegiances, and you can one day be sure that all the armed groups involved in a given place might give you a number of security guarantee, but the next day these armed groups have been, you have splinter groups and you have to renegotiate. So it's never a given. And what we do to respond to Getachew concretely is that, we have made it an absolute priority. We are refining by the day our strategy in order to be able to provide security and duty of care for our own staff. And by the way, these two midwives, they were actually contracted or contractants, if you want, but we really considered and treated them absolutely as our own employees, and also in dealing with their families. So what we do is that we review and revise our security guarantees, and we try to have a so-called risk exposure which is reasonable, comparing what we can achieve in terms of humanitarian impacts, life saved, livelihood preserved, versus the risk that we take. So this is a complex issue. We are working, as I mentioned, in Libya. In Libya, it has been at times, just to go from the airport to the capital city, trying to go through 16 checkpoints with 16 different groups, and you have to make sure that at all at this juncture, security is provided. So I move now to the other questions, I think, which I can group because they relate to how we involve youth, how we involve migrants themselves, and what do we do. And what we see is that crises are protracted. We have internally displaced people who remain displaced sometimes for more than a decade. It's even a generation, and their needs and capabilities evolve. So we have to evolve as well, and we try to do ever more, innovative projects that we propose in order to give them their own means of livelihood, to restore their capacity to take their destiny into their own hands, and to provide microeconomic supports, to provide innovative finance that can help them restart productive activities so that they can get out of dependence in terms of depending on humanitarian aid.
Thank you. Christophe?
Yeah, maybe just first on this question, I talked about this already at the example of the Kudra project, and I think we have a pitch as well at 12 o'clock, so if you want to learn more about the specific approaches of Kudra, you are really invited. I think one thing is you have to learn exactly what kind of groups do you have, what kind of different groups you have. You have really to learn the local context in order to target properly your programs. And then you, as I said, you have to experiment also with different and new and innovative formats to include different groups of this, of the ones who have to be involved. What I wanted to comment on the issue of sexual exploitation in the organizations, as this has been a very important issue in the past. I mean, we have a zero tolerance policy on this one since a long time. We have clear statements in our guidelines and everywhere, and we have a compliance system where everybody who might be instead of this zero tolerance policy might be affected can refer to an independent ombudsman and also some people in our organization. But and it is working quite well. We know exactly how many cases we have, and we are following up those cases. But in the context we are discussing about, I think it's extremely important also to open up these lines of where people can complain in a migration or refugee context. Because, I mean, first of all, these people have to know where they have to complain, where they can complain, where are the institutions they can refer to. So you have to offer them in their languages and really suited to the local context possibilities where they can complain. We do this after we did an evaluation how well our system is functioning, and we do a lot of efforts that this can't happen.
Thank you. Okay, Maimouna.
Yeah.
You have one.
I just want to comment on the question of youth. I think in our work, we have a few programs which include youth. One of the program is we have a youth one-stop center program. This is inclusive, regardless of you are locals or the migrants. And we have trained around 500,000 youth, and it's inclusive for everybody. And we also have the International Youth Fund, where you were given out to them to better up their livelihood. At the same time, when we do our program, for example, public spaces, when we have public spaces program, we gone through the people process, public participation process, which also include the locals and also the migrant. And on top of that, not only in the normal discussion, we will also have this program, we call it Mindscraft program, which include not only the youth, but also the children, where it's a real program, a real project. How do they want to design their own space? Regardless, you are given the opportunity to be in our program, and that shows that we are trying to be inclusive as much as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to take 3 more questions and then together. There was a question here for the lady. Number 6. Number 2. And then in the back.
Good morning. Thanks to all the participants. I'm here as a long-time humanitarian and as a member of a new movement called United Against Inhumanity, which is concerned with war-related atrocity and the erosion of the asylum system. So my one question is that I'm glad to hear that the less for less or less for more notion policy is over. But my reality is that's not what I'm finding as we see an increase in the criminalization of people seeking asylum. I'm talking about here in Europe, and also those who are trying to be of help. And criminalization means that they often end up in prison. Thank you.
Number 2, thank you.
Thank you very much. My name is Anna from the OECD. A very interesting panel. We heard a lot about governance. It's been often said this hasn't been a migration crisis, it's more been a governance crisis, at least for the EU. We heard about the role of multi-level governments, the local, the regional, the national, and then the supranational importance of the authorities have been evocated. But concretely, what your organization suggests this multi-level government approach should work like? Should it be through dialogues? Should it be through incentives? Should it be through contracts? What, in your experience, has worked so far, including what's the role of the university in bringing together this different level of government? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. My name is Carlos Rito. I'm the head of Brazilian Climate Observatory. I'd like to thank you for the panel, fantastic panel. I'd like to hear from anyone who wants to answer. How do you see climate change being as a catalyst of increasing migration and forced displacement? How this could be inserted into the policies, measures, and actions to tackle migration, because as we could foresee, this is something that it might happen more and more in a broader scale and nationally, internationally, within regions. And that's it. Thank you very much.
I think we can take one more question and then we'll have 3 minutes for each speaker to answer. So if there is one more question. Yes.
Thank you. My name is Jackie. During this panel, I had two interesting information coming from Memuna and from Christopher. One said that there is an absolute need for data to be collected and to be analyzed. And Christopher raised a point about identification of the migrants and an improvement for the border management. In my opinion, I thought that Frontex was the organization in charge of that, meaning dealing with enrollment of migrants to have really a significant and very reliable database, and also for border management. So is it the case? Because I have attended several meetings with Frontex, and it seems that no decision have been made for the last years.
Thank you. There is one question that we received online, which is from the Economic Development Foundation. One important issue is the situation of transit countries like Turkey. What can be done to increase the cooperation and help with the burden of the countries like Turkey, Lebanon, and the countries in the region, for example? So we have about 15 minutes. So if we really stick to 3 minutes each, we can all have final remarks. Enrico?
I would like to come back to two questions that we heard before. One was the question on smugglers, because I think it was a good question, because we put everything in the same box at the end of the day in this crisis, and we risk to have bad answers. On smugglers, I was yesterday, for instance, in a panel, taking the opportunity to have one of the leaders attending this summit. We had a discussion with our students at the university, and this leader was the Czech Prime Minister, and his approach is a very tough approach on the immigration policy of the European Union. So saying that is not an immigration problem, is a fight against smugglers. Frankly speaking, I can't agree with this approach. But it's very easy to push our people to think that, yes, is a smuggler problem before then a migration crisis. So the key point is to avoid this big misunderstanding. We need to have control of the situation. This is the key point. For instance, my experience with Mare Nostrum was that Mare Nostrum was with the control of the Mediterranean by the Navy. It was also the way to tackle smugglers, because you had there the possibility to have clues and to have how to prove with images, with pictures and so on, the possibility to take them into a court, into jail, but only with control of the situation and control of the sea in case of the Mediterranean. So I underline this point. Control is the way to avoid all this misunderstanding and is the way to have solutions. And another big point was about youth and about how to involve migrants. We have a program we developed since the beginning in Sciences Po, but also I know many other universities did the same, a program to involve migrants, to give them the possibility, and refugees, to give them the possibility to have a fast track, and to have then an integration through education. So it was a successful one. We have Syrian students, successful Syrian students. I'm personally very happy of that. But I know that we need specific programs on that. We can't count only on the, I would say, voluntaristic approach of the universities. We need to focus the point and to say we have to integrate them not only with I would say fundamental tools, but also giving them the possibility to develop more what they were doing in their own countries, and education university is one of them.
Thank you, Enrico. Please.
Thank you. Maybe I follow on that on the youth issue. I think for us, the first thing has been to acknowledge that we're not including youth enough. And I think that's an honest acknowledgement that we do a lot of our programs for rather than with youth. And this acknowledgement has led the Secretary General to appoint a youth envoy at the global level, but also for the UN to adopt a deliberate policy on youth inclusion in all of our programming, from local level to national to regional to global. At UNDP, we have launched with the Rwandan government what we call Youth Connect, because it's not just enough to include youth locally. We also need to create platforms for youth to connect with each other. And we have found this platform to be magnetic and magical, you know, when young people from all over the world meet each other and are able to claim the space they have for conversation and to unleash their talent in the development space. We see a lot of magic happening there and the huge potential for us to stop seeing youth just as the problem, as a threat, you know, and that's the reason why we engage them, but also to understand that the young population have a lot to contribute, and we just need to facilitate and give them that platform. On sexual exploitation, I think, again, something that we feel is an indictment on our system, you know, an international system, that this situation exists. And the Secretary General at the highest level has articulated politically zero tolerance for this within the UN system, and therefore a huge program rolled out on prevention of sexual exploitation and harassment, which now dominates our programming at all levels. And then finally, maybe to comment on the issue of governance. I think that governance here, we have to look at governance in countries that generate migrants and governance in countries that receive them. Again, it is about a commitment to ending inequality. And inequality exists at all levels of our society today. And it is the inequality that is at the heart of forced migration and irregular migration. I've linked this also to climate change issue that was mentioned. Unless we begin to see the effects of climate change as something that requires immediate, urgent development response, it will continue to contribute to the issue. And from the UN side, we argue and advocate for global responsibility for climate action, as indeed was agreed in the city a couple of years ago. This has to be part of the solution.
Thank you. Christopher?
Yeah, maybe I continue to what has been said. First of all, climate. Yes, I totally agree. And I said before, there's a little bit of missing element in the compacts that, especially also internally displaced persons, because of climatic reasons or extreme weather events, are not included yet. So I think we have to work on it. But I, of course, would be happy if the compact which we have will be endorsed now by the parliaments. But we have to pay more attention to the climate issue and to the internally displaced persons. Secondly, on governance, what I found so interesting is with the migration and the refugee crisis, with the migration issue and the refugee crisis, problems which we have in governance have become more visible and even more demanding, I would say. And for me, I mean, we are running a lot of governance programs. One thing is very important. We see, for example, I'm coming back to UNHCR, UN Habitat. We see, for example, a lack of a proper decentralization and a proper distribution of tasks and functions inside of a country. So decentralization, strengthening local communities politically, financially, and from their administrative capacity would be something which I've found very important to develop a better multi-level governance system, not only the global but also the local. A border management, my remark was on our efforts not at the border to Europe, but we are working in the border management of the transit countries, for example, with the Better Migration Management Program financed by the EU at the Horn of Africa. And we had been criticized a lot on this work. And I still believe that this is a very important work in order really to empower the people also to deal with border management differently, to identify who is coming and why is he coming and what kind of rights does this person have and so on and so forth. So including the human rights issue in border management is key. on Turkey. Kudra is working on Turkey, on Lebanon, on Iraq, and on Jordan. So I would also refer again to the program. And regarding crime, because there had been this yes, of course, we see still the tendency of criminalization of migrants, and I agree with what you have said before. This is of course not the case. But what I would also advise to all of us, especially for us at the development world, we have also to consider the security problems involved in the issue seriously. Don't deny that there are security challenges, because if we deny this, we have a narrative which will then lead again to the right-wing and populist movement. And we have really seriously to tackle in a transparent way all the problems which we have on a human rights basis. And security issues are part of it.
Thank you, Christopher. Gilles?
Yes, I'd like just to address two questions to conclude. I think the question of Nora on the criminalization of migrants and the criminalization of those who try to bring assistance and protection. It goes back to my wish or my dream. Actually, in the Global Compact on Migration, there is, and we are quite glad, a clear instruction that actually immigrant detention should be only of last resort, but there are so many alternatives, and actually we are very much convinced that it is absolutely inappropriate, costly, and something which should be avoided. And we are a bit disappointed actually with the text of the Global Compact on Migration, which does not completely forbid the detention of children, migrants, and this should have been done. And of course, families must be kept together, and the rights to family life should be upheld. So I hope that this will be not only endorsed but implemented concretely. And with regards to the criminalization of humanitarian assistance, the Global Compact on Migration clearly states or just reasserts that those who bring assistance which is of a strictly humanitarian nature cannot be prosecuted, and these acts of humanity shouldn't be criminalized. So this is key. The second question, I think, is with regard to the question of our friends from Sudan on youth. I was last week in the Fergana Valley in Tajikistan, last Saturday, and it was quite telling to see actually volunteers of the Tajik Red Crescent Society who were bringing together every week mothers, grandmothers of missing migrants. And only by bringing them together, they were succeeding in empowering those women to understand that they are not alone in their plights, to try to stop the stigmatization that these women were suffering in their communities because their children, be it their son, daughters, and grandchildren, have left first to Russia and possibly others to the Middle East. And this was really a very rejoicing project where we could see that it was helping those women which stayed in those communities to be first reintegrated, not stigmatized, and second supported. And we were able to give some news about the whereabouts of some of their sons and grandsons and granddaughters. And this was something which was very rejoicing. And this is engagement of youth. So I would really, conclude by calling on youth to engage.
Thank you. Our last 3 minutes are yours.
Thank you, Robert. I think when we talk about the comprehensive approach and also about the climate change and the data, I think in order to come up with a comprehensive approach, that's what I mentioned, that is very, very important for us to have this sex disaggregated data. When we have the data, we have the methodology to analyze, then we can have an informed or evidence base to have any policies on migrant in this case. For example, like just very example, the mayor of Mechelen in Belgium, he has enough data to start with mixed school, mixed youth sport, and also engage with his citizen almost daily. And that's, I think this is very, very important, having a data to have an informed, evidence-based in formulation of the whatever approach that we want to do for the migrant. And second is about the climate change. I think I agreed that climate change is also one of the cause of migrant, due to either is it natural or is it man-made. And this will also affect the economics, the physical, social, and sometimes the psychological of the people living in it. Force people to move out. So I think when we talk about the comprehensive, we have to look at all angles. I know it's not easy. It's not easy, but it's have to look at all angles. And to me, data is important. Thank you.
So thank you very much, everyone. It was really a very interesting conversation. I hope everyone in the room enjoyed it, and I hope that wish you all the best of luck, all of you, and hopefully next year we'll even have people from the community and maybe also youth that are present in the panels. And thanks all, and I hope you have a great day in Paris Peace Forum.